The research question we will be exploring is how social isolation affects the mental health of Melbourne men aged 18 to 30. Social isolation can be defined as an objective circumstance in which there is a reduced or complete lack of social relationships and interactions. The effects of social isolation on mental health has been thoroughly researched in older adults and women and has been found to have correlations with poor mental health. However, research revolving around younger men is lacking. The current global pandemic has caused areas such as Melbourne to become heavily restricted in social activities. The lack of previous research on young men has meant that these implications of the heavy restrictions are unknown. In order to provide the appropriate support for men in social isolation and ensure minimal harm is caused, the mental health aspects and consequences should be studied.
Our research design would likely be a mixed method embed study, using a questionnaire with a mixture of closed and open questions. The reason for this is that quantitative results alone may tell us that mental health has been affected during the quarantine. However, not whether this was due to social isolation. Qualitative open questions allow for participants to expand upon their experiences during the isolation period and may allow insight into whether indeed social isolation is the factor resulting in mental health being affected, or if other factors play a role, such as the loss of a loved one or previous history of a seasonal depression. There are definite limitations to the study, such as face-to-face interviews leading to inaccurate responses as a result of participants feeling uncomfortable revealing sensitive information. To counteract this, anonymous questionnaires were selected and would be distributed via SurveyMonkey. Unfortunately, this would mean that our sample may be compromised, as we cannot guarantee all participants are indeed Melbourne men aged 18 to 30, as well as not all questions may be interpreted correctly. This is a compromise we had to take, as we would rather risk a possible error in the sampling group, which may not in fact occur, than a larger error in the honesty of responses. Our study population is Melbourne men aged 18 to 30, and our theoretical group is all men aged 18 to 30, as this is a group which is largely missed in the current existing research revolving social isolation and its effect on mental health. Non-probability sampling would be used to allow a questionnaire to get into the public. Snowball sampling would be performed by asking Melbourne residents to share a questionnaire through social media accounts. This would be done to ensure that the participants volunteering remain completely anonymous to the research team. The sample size would be large, as a small sample size would have a high risk of random error. For example, a sample size of 10 may find all 10 participants to have been negatively affected, showing 100% correlation. However, a sample size of 20 may reveal only 10 have been negatively affected, meaning 50% of participants, and so a very large sample size would be required to prevent this error.
The mental health participants will be measured during the quarantine and then remeasured 6 months later, and then again 1 year after the quarantine period is over. Quantitatively, this will be measured by using the World Health Organization WHO5 Wellbeing Index, which is a proven valid and reliable self-administered survey consisting of 5 statements ranked on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 additional qualitative questions will be added and validated using the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, which has been proven to be valid, reliable, and easy for researchers to implement, in order to try to determine the causes for that individual's mental well-being. Limitations can occur in this experiment as a result of the anonymous and voluntary nature of this research, meaning the same participants may not participate in the subsequent questionnaires preceding the quarantine period. To maintain the anonymous nature of this research, the 2 questionnaires following the quarantine will be redistributed under the same conditions as the original, meaning not all participants from the original questionnaire may re-participate. A large sample would thus be required to ensure that this does not affect results, but rather provides a general assessment of Melbourne's 18 to 30-year-old men's mental well-being as a whole. Particular ethical concerns need to be taken into consideration to ensure the research is appropriate to be conducted. This research is based on individual psychological experiences and questioning whether traumatic events have taken a toll on them. The nature of this research involves possibly uncomfortable probing into the minds of participants and thus could reveal a negative effect on patients when attempting to record these potentially disturbing events. In this case, we must remember the ethical principle of non-maleficence, in particular, causing possible psychological harm as well as social harm. To ensure non-maleficence, we would explain in detail the possible contents of the questionnaire before individuals participate, ensuring veracity. This leads into the ethical principle of autonomy, which would be ensured by allowing the survey to be a completely voluntary questionnaire that can be non-completed if a participant decides against finishing halfway through. Consent would be required before the results are sent to the research team. The anonymous nature of this questionnaire would ensure that the research team have no idea where the information is coming from, hence minimizing risk of social harm through confidentiality, and also ensure that the research team is not aware of who begins but does not complete the questionnaire.
If social isolation negatively affects the mental health of young men, then this would mean the research into more appropriate stress assistance for men would have to be undertaken. However, when social isolation does appear to have some effect, but not a very strong correlation is present, then further research could be undertaken to investigate other causes and factors that may instead be attributing to the negative mental health of young men. The results could potentially pinpoint important areas where mental health of young men is suffering and allow the government to utilize particular services to help and improve the quality of people's mental well-being. That concludes our research proposal. Thank you for listening.